Ever experienced that dull, achy pain that's right outside your shin that all of a sudden becomes like, oh my gosh, every time you step? Well, if you've ever experienced shin splints, you know that it is not fun, but it's something that runners experience quite frequently. And so in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why shin splints happen in the first place, but then the 5 yoga poses that you can do to really help alleviate that injury and prevent the injury. So let's dive in, but before we do, just know that I'm Morgan. I'm a registered dietitian and registered yoga teacher. My yoga teaching revolves around helping runners and athletes perform their best and feel their best. And after a decade of teaching runners, I think I know a thing or two about shin splints. I've experienced them myself, and this was way early on before I actually had yoga as a practice, and it became so intense that it actually developed into a stress fracture. So we're going to talk about how to avoid that. Let's just say that. Okay, I don't know why I have my shoes on, but I do. So we're going to take those off. Let's jump on a mat. You don't actually need a mat, so you could just be in your living room floor. It doesn't really matter. So shin splints happen when we've overused, our calves are super tight, and that tendon that's in the front part of our shin starts to get aggravated. And when it gets aggravated, it's going to pull on your tibia, this muscle that's right outside, right kind of on that lateral part of your lower leg. It's going to pull on that and become really tender, inflamed, and sometimes it even has a red coloration to it. But then what can happen over time is that it actually starts to pull on your the bone, and then becomes sort of like that stress fracture. But let's not go there today. Just talking about the shin splints again, is that overuse and from inflammation. So when we're thinking about what we want to do to alleviate that, we want to have a multi-dimensional approach. So it's not that you can, the number one thing you want to do is to stretch out the calf. That's probably first and foremost, I think. So we'll talk about how to do that. Stretch out the calf, and then you also want to strengthen this muscle, because when you're running, a lot of these posterior hammies and calves are doing work, but not so much on that front, those little tiny muscles. And so we'll talk about a couple poses that you can do to help strengthen, to create more balance. And then you also want to think about strengthening the arch of the foot and just the overall foot stability, because if you're strengthening the arch, the way that weight is distributed will be much more balanced and not produce so much sort of imbalance. So let's dive into those 5 poses that you should be doing every day if you're dealing with shin splints, to really help negate it and kick it to the curb. But also these are poses that you're going to see in a yoga practice. So if you are doing yoga regularly, or you should start, I'll put videos below, then you wouldn't have to worry about incorporating them. So the first pose is going to be a lunge. Now, option 1 is to hang out on your knee. But again, this pose is going to be what's going to help strengthen this first part of, or that front part of our shin. And so if you're on the back of your knee, I find that it's not as, you don't feel so like wibbly wobbly, which means that this muscle isn't firing quite to the same degree. So you can stay there, or see what it would be like if you come all the way up into a high lunge. I like to keep my hands on my hips just so we have a little bit more stability from that front. And we're going to hold it for a few breaths. Hips face the front of the room, the front of your mat, wherever you are. Shoulders are also in line. Big breath in. Push out through your back heel, work front thigh parallel towards floor, push into the 4 corners of your feet. Move your kneecap out to the side, hug your glute in. Step forward and step back, other side. Of course, can't do one side without the other, right? So as we are strengthening that front part, we're actually even stretching the back, ankle, Achilles, calf, and the arch of the foot. So even though in that first side I told you to kind of focus on the front leg, you're actually getting a lot of benefit for shin splints in that back leg as well. So hug your glutes down, press your tailbone down, lift your chest, stretch your spine, ground through the 4 corners of your feet. Make sure your front knee is stacked right on top of your ankle. Big breath in and step forward. Whew, Nelly. Okay, so the number one pose, lunge. The second pose that I want you to do when we're working with shin splints to reduce the shin splints sort of intensity or to prevent shin splints, especially if you've had them before, is going to be down dog. So with down dog, spread your hands nice and wide, and index finger is going to point straight ahead. So hands are wider, just a smidgen wider than shoulders. Grip the floor with the fingertips, press into the inner edge of your hands. Inner edge is index finger and thumb. And then your hamstrings are probably tight because you've been doing all that running. So bend your knees a lot and then press your hips back, press your rib cage towards your thighs. And then as you can, depending on the tightness of your hamstrings and calves, straighten one leg towards capacity. I like to kind of even pedal out my feet here. So this is stretching out the calf. This is also helping strengthen and support and stretch the arches of our feet. So spread your toes wide, press your hands down evenly. Big breath in. And big breath out. Very nice. So number two pose, down dog. The third pose that's going to be really great for shin splints is going to be a little bit more advanced. So depending on your yoga practice, I'm going to give you some options. So we're coming into malasana, which is also referred to as a squat. Now, if you're like, oh my gosh, I've never come into a squat in my life, you're going to start with your feet wider and turn your toes out slightly, but your heels are just a little wider than your hips. And then from there, press into the inner edge and the outer edge of your foot evenly. So really press into your feet, and then you're going to begin to sit your hips low. So your knees are tracking in the same direction as your feet. And if when you sit down, your heels are way above the ground, that's okay. Just work into that. It can also be helpful to wedge like a blanket or the back part of your mat if you're on a mat underneath your heels. That's another option. But what this is doing is stretching the calf and also strengthening in that first part and working into the ankle. All the things at once. And you can bring your hands to heart center and use the strength of your arms to kind of press your knees out. But you're more so pressing your thighs out, your tailbone's pressing down, navel's pulled in, your core is engaged. It's a good idea to do all of these poses after a run when your body's already warmed up. I wouldn't recommend popping into squat if you are cold and you're just kind of watching the video, but know that the squat pose is a really great one for working into shin splints. So that's number 3, malasana squat. The fourth one, this is another one that you want to be warmed up for. So if you're not warmed up right now, come back to it later. So we're coming into a wide-legged squat but with a slight variation. That variation and wide legs means when I extend my arms out, my wrist and feet are in the same line. And now bring your hands to your hips, turn your toes in slightly. Press through the outer edge of your foot, press through your heel, and then press into your entire foot evenly. Can you lift up into the arch of your foot? It's a super subtle movement, but it helps a ton. Draw your tailbone down, engage your glutes, sit up nice and tall. Sit up, stand up. And then right where your glutes and your hamstrings meet, put your fingers there and fire that. Keep it fired as you begin to fold forward. Now, you may not go very far, you might go all the way. But what we want to focus on when it relates to the shin splints is the stretch in the outside part of the shin. So stretching into the tibia. So you may have to kind of turn your toes a little bit more, or maybe you turn too much. But for most of us, it's just a slight variation and just a slight turning in of the toes. Lift your pelvis, engaging the glutes and hamstrings. Big breath in. And big breath out. So number 4 thing, wide-legged squat. The 5th yoga pose that's helpful for shin splints in preventing them and working through them. This one's probably my absolute favorite because it doesn't require that you be warmed up and you can do it at any point in time. This is also what I like to call TV yoga. If you're not familiar with TV yoga, check out the video below and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so you're going to lay on your back, and then from here, interlace your fingers behind your left thigh. So anywhere on that left thigh where they kind of naturally want to go. Point and flex your foot, and you're going to notice sensations in the back and in the front of your foot, and just see what that feels like. You can even make little ankle circles, increasing range of motion and mobility. And then what we're really going to do is stretch into the calf. So to do that, curl your toes towards your face. And then if you can walk your feet up. Now, if you're feeling it a lot in your hamstring, what I would recommend doing is bending your knee more and see if then you can still kick your heel up towards the ceiling and the sky, wherever you are, getting that stretch into the calf, my gosh. This is also, if you've ever seen, I do a lot of it in my teaching and in my own personal practice where I use a strap, and I put the strap around the ball of my foot, hold on to each side. You can also do this with a towel and do that same sensation, but without having to hold your leg. So I probably like the strap variation more, but this is just a great option if you don't have a strap or a towel nearby. And then switch sides. Again, you're starting with the pointing and flexing of your foot. And this is a good little sequence on the ground here to do. This one you could totally do every day. And I would certainly say that if you're working with shin splints, you want to sort of, it's come from a lot of overuse, and so it's going to take a good chunk of time to get them worked out, and this is a good thing to do every day. And then same thing, so push your heel up, feeling that in the back of the leg. Now I like to keep my opposite leg planted, foot's on the floor, ground, because if you straighten your leg, which you can certainly do as well, it's just going to be a little more intense in that hip flexor. So if you can do that comfortably, depending on the tightness and what's going on, perfect. Otherwise, you can always keep the foot planted. But either way, your hips, both of them are grounded into the mat. Very nice. So that's the fifth thing, is with the strap or leg up, getting that nice calf stretch. You can even hug your knees in. That always feels good. Not related to shin splints, but certainly feels delicious. So let's review real fast. The first thing that you can do, again, shin splints come from overuse, and sort of that tendon being pulled on the front of the leg. And you can do lots of different things, but 5 yoga poses that you can do to help. The number one thing is going to be, what was the number one thing? The number one thing is, I don't know, but working backwards, we'll try that. You can do the strap, laying on your back with the strap, and the fourth thing we talked about was the wide-legged fold. The third thing was the squat. The second thing was down dog, and the first part was a lunge, my gosh, to strengthen that. So I think that my brain needs a little bit of a snack, judging by the way that recall went, but either way, I hope that you found this video tremendously helpful, and if so, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe too, so you can catch a new video about yoga for runners, nutrition, wellness, all that good stuff every week. My name is Morgan again, and I am so happy that you joined, and until next time, I will see you soon, and keep it kind.